Connor, we think we're talking about today, huh? Take a wild guess is what the main topic has been here.
I'm going to guess you guys are going really in-depth on South Carolina Vandy. It was a great game. I heard the sun came out for about 6 seconds. A lot of good moments, two competitive teams. I'm going to guess it's been blowing up your phone lines.
It really has been.
Yeah. It's been that one and 24-2 Kentucky over Mississippi State. Yeah, the two worst games in the SEC of what we were talking about. Yeah, there is a feeling across Razorback fandom, Connor, that goes back decades, where it is Arkansas versus everybody else in the SEC, Arkansas versus ESPN versus the NCAA versus the SEC office. And I have a real difficult time today telling Arkansas fans that they're wrong about that, because they were royally screwed by the officials, then by the league office, and then, Connor, they were told to like it. And I have a problem with the way that was done.
Yeah, and especially after the offseason that was, where you see those two games that get added to the schedule, and it just makes you feel like, man, what does Arkansas have to do to catch a break? And I totally get the frustration, because it's not just, that was a key play in the game and momentum-changing play. That's the game right there. Like, that's the entire game. And if we're going to talk about whether or not there was a clear fumble, there was a clear result if Arkansas gets that call correct. And that's the frustrating thing for Arkansas fans, who obviously, when you go over 1,000 days without an SEC win, you know that those opportunities are fleeting, and they can be, especially in a year like this with Sam Pittman, where we were saying coming into the year, man, if he gets to 3 wins, SEC Coach of the Year. And to think that they should have been at 2-1 and coming off of a road win at Auburn, I mean, yeah, you're going to be frustrated. And I totally get it. Usually I tell fans in situations like these, the officials want to get you, kind of relax, you can be breath, try and look at the big picture. No. Arkansas fans, you have every right to be upset right now, because the league just cost you a game. I mean, simple as that. The league cost you a game. And that game, if there was ever a game that deserves to have an asterisk on it, that one is it.
Do you think the SEC tries to protect the so-called blue bloods in football? Because, I think it's difficult to argue against that thought when you look at the way the schedule was put together by the league office. When you see plays like this, there is a feeling, with the league office being right in the middle between Auburn and Alabama, that the league does lean towards those schools, towards Florida, towards Tennessee, and leans away from Arkansas. Maybe it's different in the other sports, but it's really difficult to argue against that thought in football. As a detached observer and someone who lives in Orlando, what do you see?
I can understand why it would feel like that. I think there are still moments, though, when even the big-time powers have frustrating moments that go against them. Alabama in the Iron Bowl last year had a second added on to that clock, and it made all the difference. We've seen instances in the past where contenders have been really in tough spots and have been robbed, where, you could go back a couple of years ago where LSU thought that the Devin White targeting penalty that sidelined him for the first half of Alabama was the most egregious call in the history of the sport. And there are moments where these contenders get really frustrated. And you know what? I get it. But when you're the team that's been beaten down by the conference itself, and you feel like the officials are working against you as well in those key moments, yeah, I totally understand that. I don't necessarily buy into this belief that the conference wants Alabama and wants LSU and Georgia to win every single game, and that it doesn't want Auburn, or it doesn't want an Arkansas to pull ahead in a game like that against Auburn. I don't necessarily think that's a subconscious thing. I think they just made a really bad call in the heat of the moment, and they didn't understand the full complexity of the rule. And, as a result, Arkansas fans have every right to be unhappy.
Speaking of Connor O'Gara here on Halftime, Connor, I want to talk a little bit about a positive that probably came out of this game. Felipe Franks really played well, had obviously his best showing as a Razorback, and hopefully that'll continue. Particularly, though, I was thoroughly impressed with Traylon Smith running the ball for Arkansas, and I think moving forward for this football team, aside from the special teams problems and the missed tackles that the defense had, Arkansas probably just found a really, really good 1-2 punch at the running back position that could prove some defense and some problems in the rest of the season.
If you had told me before the start of the season that Arkansas is going to go into Auburn without Rakeem Boyd and they're going to walk out of there thinking they should have won that game, I would have laughed you out of the room. I really, really would. And that's a testament to what this ground game has been able to figure out. And there have been some tough moments so far with Kendall Briles' offense, but yeah, without Rakeem Boyd to have that good of a performance on the ground and all around, as you say, a bell cow back, I mean, that is ideal because I think Felipe needs that. I think he needs a back that he can also turn to in those obvious passing situations and dump it off to and not feel like he has to make that big-time home run play. And, like, that's such a question mark if your back can catch some passes out of the backfield. I think that's such an added bonus for him to be able to have. It was a positive. It absolutely was. And I think that's an Auburn defense that's really banged up right now without KJ Britt, who's probably the best run defender in the SEC. They really struggled, but that's still a testament to Arkansas taking advantage of some of those matchups, taking advantage of the conditions with someone who wasn't necessarily on all of our radars coming into this season.
Love it. It was a great weekend for football and a lot of no defense in the SEC as well. I mean, when you look at all the games that are going, I just want to ask you what your biggest surprise was of the weekend. Was it the Bama's lack of defense, Mississippi State getting 2 points, or LSU just being bad this year? I mean, there's a lot that you could take away from this weekend. What was the biggest surprise for you this weekend coming out of the SEC?
Yeah, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I did have A&M winning 42-38 against Florida. So I was a point off on that one. That's the best prediction I've ever had, I think, in my entire life. So I'm just going to not make predictions anymore. I'm going to walk off on that one. But
2 away,
the
man.
biggest surprise,
that's good.
I mean, it was lucky. Let's be honest. LSU though, still, the fact that defense was that bad for 60 minutes was unbelievable to me. I mean, we saw what Mississippi State did in week 1, and we're thinking, all right, it's just Bo Pelini wasn't willing to make those adjustments. They looked much better against Vandy, kind of a get-right game. They've got Derek Stingley back healthy. Jacoby Stevens is good to go. And even those guys looked terrible in that game on Saturday against Connor Bazelak, a quarterback who had never started in this offense. They were without 2 of their best wide receivers, Kiki Chisholm and Damon Hazelton, and it didn't even matter. LSU looked like it had no business being on the field, like it didn't care that it was on the field. The adjustments weren't there from Bo Pelini, and this defense is a mess. Week 1, they allowed 8.3 yards per play in what was a historically bad performance against this MSU offense. And against Mizzou, they allowed 8.6 yards per play. Bo Pelini is looking like one of the worst hires of the offseason, and it's not even close. And I think that there are a lot of LSU fans that would pay they would pretty much give Barry Odom a blank check right now to come over and fix their defense.
Now, I know it's a different deal because it's all SEC games this year, but Connor, there are 7 SEC teams allowing 30 or more points per game. And let's just say, Ole Miss, you're at a level of your own, 51.7 points allowed per game. But this is nuts when you look at total defense. Alabama, 4th worst in the SEC. LSU, 3rd worst. Florida, 2nd worst. Ole Miss, 8th grade. It's like the Big 12 has invaded the SEC, Connor, and maybe it'll be, hey, it's always been fun to watch SEC football, but this feels a little bit more like the mid to late 90s.
It's a mix of 3 things, in my opinion. It's one, offenses have modernized, defenses are still catching up. More teams than ever are doing this in the SEC. Really few teams in the SEC are actually running this kind of like condensed spread, obvious run offense. Kentucky feels like the only team that's still doing that. But, you look around the conference and, Dan Mullen was saying coming into the year, we've tackled like 2 times since the Orange Bowl. He was saying that at the start of the season. And it shows. These teams look like they haven't tackled all offseason. We talked about what would happen when these teams don't necessarily have this full spring and this weird offseason that's been. We're seeing it. We're seeing it all across the SEC with the exception of Georgia, because even a team like Bama looked like it didn't know how to tackle in the open field. I mean, scheme is one thing. That's all well and good. And Lane was incredible at scheming guys open, but Bama's just not making tackles at this point. And Florida is the worst in the SEC at making open field tackles. So you're seeing, even with superior athletes on the field, guys who look like all-conference players coming into this year, tackling is a major issue in this conference, and it's conference-wide. And, yeah, it does feel like the Big 12 at this point. It kind of feels like, yep, first team to 40 is going to have the best chance to win on this given day.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. Connor, we'll leave it there. Always appreciate you. Thanks for coming on just a little bit late today. You knew we had a lot of callers, so thanks for adjusting.
Not a problem. Guys, if you ever want to talk more South Carolina Vandy, that's the place to call.
Well, that'll be the rest of the show. That'll be the rest of the show. It's Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. We'll have him again next Monday.